Hello, everybody. Come on in. Come on in. Come on in. You're here for the mock cross-examination of Jay Wilds, Part 2. And I'm Brendan Kenny. I'm a lawyer in the Twin Cities, and I will be doing Part 2 right now. Come on in. Come on in. Thank you so much for being here. Sorry I was a few minutes late. I was handling all sorts of business. Thank you for sharing. So to share this with other people who might be interested, all you need to do is swipe to the left, swipe to the right, up or down, and push share on Twitter, on Facebook, email. Thank you for the hearts. Currency on Periscope is hearts, so if you like what you're seeing, if you like what's going on, just send some hearts my way. I appreciate it. I'm not going to be able to interact with you guys much during this, because I'm going to be doing the cross-examination. I need to stay in character, so feel free to make comments if you like. And as people roll in, you can tell them what's going on. I'm going to be able to do this probably for about an hour, if I'm not interrupted by whatever else is going on in my family. And for those who are new, or just as a reminder, this is not a real cross-examination. It's an idea of how one could be conducted, and should have been conducted and done in Adnan Syed's defense. You'll notice it's only me. There's no cross-examinee, and that's because using the technique that I'm doing, you don't really need to have a witness. That's the idea, that I'm going to be putting to Jay Wilds short, concise, clear statements that call for a yes or no answer, and if he answers no, he's going to look bad. And so typically most witnesses during that time, if they don't want to look terrible, will answer yes to questions that they can't but answer yes to. There will be probably a few times where I'm going to introduce impeachment with a prior inconsistent statement. So that'll be a little different. And I'm trying to use a board behind me that might not work. I'm sorry, but if I was in front of a jury and if I was dealing with the incredible inconsistencies that Jay Wilds has in his testimony, I'd have to have some verbal prop so the jury can see exactly what's going on and why the lies are so important and the inconsistencies are so important. If you listen to Christina Gutierrez's cross-examination, I think the jury got the idea that Jay lies, but they didn't understand about what, why, and why it was important. So I'm going to try to change that. I only have an hour. I'm going to be focusing on what Jay told the police in his official police statements about January 13th. There's going to be some build up to that and maybe some letdown at the end. I can't promise that I'm going to cover everything from January 13th. I certainly won't, but I'm going to try to cover some of it. Okay. Oh, I think I blocked someone who's a troll. And you'll have to deal with trolls, because I can't. So we're going to get started. Let me just see. Yes, that's the best version of hard rain's that going to fall that I've heard. So I'm going to move this chair a little bit. You're going to see more of the board behind me, and hopefully it will help. And at the very least, it's going to help me. So bear with me, even if you can't see everything behind me. We're going to have a little bit of suspension of disbelief, which you're already on board with, apparently, because we're in a basement in Shakopee with the possibility that my children will come screaming in at any moment. So sorry about the weird movement. I'm trying to get this straight and trying for you guys to be able to see what's behind me. Well, we're going to get as close as we can with this. So we're going to get started. Yes, Your Honor, I'm ready to resume cross-examination. I'm going to ask you some questions about what you told police about January 13th. You understand. Fair to say you're a liar? You told police different stories on different occasions about many things on January 13th. You understand that police are in charge of investigating crimes. Police are in charge of solving crimes. Police are in charge of finding out who committed crimes and putting that person under arrest. And then the jury here is responsible for bringing the perpetrator to justice, for deciding whether the state's case succeeds. You knew that when you were talking to police. And you knew that the information you provided to police was important. You knew that what you told police could influence the investigation. You knew that if you provided false information, the wrong person could be identified as a suspect. You knew if you provided false information, the wrong person could be charged with Hae Min Lee's murder. And you knew if you provided wrong information, the wrong person could be brought to trial. You knew that if you provided false information, the wrong person could be convicted of this murder. You knew if you provided false information that the wrong person could be sent to prison for this murder. You knew if you provided false information that the wrong person could be sent to prison for life for this murder. You knew that You knew that if you provided false information, the person who murdered Hae Min Lee could go free. You knew if you provided false information that Hae Min Lee's family may never get justice. You knew if you provided false information that a killer would be loose. I'm going to ask you some questions about the importance of the truth. You understand? You're not a bad person. You don't want the wrong person to be put away for Hae Min Lee's murder. You don't want the guilty person to get away with Hae Min Lee's murder. Stephanie was friends with Hae Min Lee. You know many other people who were friends with Hae Min Lee. You know that they want to find justice. And you don't want to stand in the way of that. I'm going to ask you some questions about the interrogations that you had with police. You understand? And I'm going to ask specifically about the interrogations before your official police statements. You understand? Your first official police statement was in the evening of February 27th to 28th. You were at the police headquarters, scratch that. You were at the police department. You were in a room with Detective McGillivray. Detective Ritz was there too. You knew that what you said on the record there was going to be the official police statement. You knew that what you said was being recorded. You knew that what you said would be read. You knew that what you said would be relied on by police. You knew that what you said would be relied on by the court. Now I'm going to ask you some questions about the interrogation before your official police statement. You understand? You talked to the police before you went on the record on February 27th to 28th. You talked to the police for several hours before you went on the record on February 27th to February 28th. They told you a lot about what they thought was going on in the case. They told you about how they thought Haymon Lee died. They told you that they thought Adnan Syed was the killer. They told you about Adnan Syed's cell phone. They told you that they had Adnan Syed's cell phone records. They showed you Adnan's cell phone records. They showed you pictures during the interrogation before your official police statement. One of these pictures was a map. This map was of the area around Woodlawn High School. The map included Lincoln Park. It included Periscope State Park. And they made notations along that map. You saw the notations. They told you that these marks were of cell phone pings. They showed where cell phone calls were received on January 13th. They told you that they knew you had Adnan's cell phone on January 13th. They told you that if you didn't cooperate, you could be charged with murder. They told you you could be charged with Haymon Lee's murder. You could be convicted of Haymon Lee's murder, and you could get the death penalty if you didn't cooperate. They told you this before your official police statement on February 27th to the 28th. You were scared during this interrogation. You were scared every hour of the interrogation. You were scared every minute of the interrogation. You were scared every second of the interrogation. You didn't want to be charged with the murder of Haymon Lee. You didn't want to be convicted. You didn't want to be sent to prison. And you didn't want to get the death penalty. The interrogation went on for about 3 hours. And then you told them that you'd tell them what they wanted. And it was then that your official police statement began. You made another official police statement. That was on March 5th. Before this official police statement, you had another interrogation. That interrogation was by the police. It was in an interrogation room. It was right before your official police statement. It was not on the record. They talked to you. You talked to them. They showed you documents. They showed you pictures. They pointed out some problems with your official police statement from February 27th to February 28th. They told you some things were wrong with your statement. And they talked to you for more than an hour. And then you went on the record for your second official police statement. You knew that you were on the record. You knew that what you were saying was being recorded. You knew that it would be relied on by police. You knew that it would be relied on by the court. You had a third official police statement. That was on March 18th. You had an interrogation before your third official police statement. That interrogation was in the interrogation room. Detective Ritz was there. Detective McGillivray was there. They talked to you about what you'd said in your second official police statement. They told you there were some problems with your second official police statement. They showed you some documents. They showed you some pictures. And they told you some things were wrong with your second official police statement. They talked to you about it. You talked to them. And then you went on the record for your third official police statement. And in that third official police statement, you made some changes to your testimony from the first two. I'm going to ask you some questions about what you said in those official police statements. You understand? First, I'm going to ask you about what you said about what Adnan told you about killing Hae-Min Lee. We'll begin there. Excuse me, Your Honor. I'm going to approach and write down on the board. No, Mr. Urich, this is well within the rules of evidence, and no, Your Honor, I will not assume that the prosecutor's office understands the rules of evidence based on his conduct in this case. In your first official police statement, the detectives asked you about what Adnan had told you about Hae-Min Lee's murder on January 13th. You understand? They asked you if he had told you about her murder before he committed it. You understand? You told them he had. And you told him that he told you on January 13th. Well, that blocky didn't work. Now, you also talked about what Adnan told you about Hae-Min Lee's murder in your second official police interview. You told them that he had told you that he was going to kill Hae-Min Lee on January 12th. That would be one day before her disappearance. During your second official police statement, the detectives asked you how many times Adnan had told you he was going to kill Hae-Min Lee. You said a lot. In your second official police statement, detectives asked you again, how many days before Hae-Min Lee's disappearance Adnan told you he was going to kill Hae-Min Lee? You told them 4 to 5 days. That was in the same second official police interview. I'm going to ask you some questions about what you told police about where Hae-Min Lee was murdered. You understand. They asked you in your first official police statement where Hae-Min Lee was murdered. You answered. You told them Edmondson Avenue. The detectives asked you about where Hae-Min Lee was murdered in your second official police statement. You answered the question. You told them that she was murdered at the parking lot at Best Buy. Now, You had your third official police interview on March 18th. At your third official police interview, the detectives asked you where Haymon Lee was killed. You answered. You told them that Haymon Lee was killed at Patasco, and I may be getting that wrong, State Park. Even though I'm getting the name wrong, you know where I'm talking about. Okay, we'll just call it P Park. But you told them that she was murdered in that park. I apologize, Your Honor, for the time. I'm having some technical difficulties. The whiteboard was not available. When Mr. Urick was questioning you today, he also asked you about where Haymon Lee was murdered. You answered. You told him she was murdered at Best Buy. I'm going to ask you some questions about what you said in your official police statements about Jen on January 13th. You understand? Now, Jen is a friend of yours. She's a very good friend of yours. You told police in your official police statements that you had hung out with Jen on January 13th. You told them that you'd been at her house on January 13th. I'm going to ask you some questions about what you did with Jen on January 13th. You understand? In your first official police statement, you said that you were at Jen's house around 1 p.m. and you stayed there till about 3:40. The detectives asked you what happened at 3:40. You answered. You said that you got a call from Adnan. And that's what you said in your first official police statement. 3:40. The detectives asked you what you did with Jan on January 13th in your second official police statement. You understand? You answered. You told them that you were with Jen till 3:30 on January 13th. They asked you what happened at 3:30 on January 13th. You told them that you got a call from Adnan. You told them that the call from Adnan was to come and get him. You told them that the call from Adnan was to come and get him because he had Heyman Lee's body. You talked to police about what you did with Jen on January 13th in your third official police statement. They asked you what you did with Jen on January 13th. You answered. You told them that you were at Jen's house till about 3:40. When Mr. Urich was asking you questions, he asked you about what you did with Jen on January 13th. You answered. You told him that you were with Jen till about 3:45. He asked you what happened at 3:45 p.m. You told him that you got a call from Adnan. And you told him that Adnan had called you from Best Buy. And he told you that he had Heyman Lee's body. So fair to say that every time you've made an official police statement, you told them that you were with Jen till 3:30, 3:45. And when you spoke today under oath, you told them, scratch that. When you talked to the jury under oath about January 13th, you told them that you were with Jen till about 3:45. I'm going to ask you some questions about what we're going to call P Park. You understand? You talked to police about P Park. You talked about the park in your first official police statement. You told them that you had gone with Adnan to P Park on January 13th. You told them that you were with Adnan at P Park on January 13th for about 35 minutes. You told them you were there from 4:35 to 5:05. You talked to police about P Park in your second official police statement. You told them you had gone there with Adnan on January 13th. You told them you were there for about 20 minutes. You told them you were there from 4:30 to 4:50. You talked to police about going to P Park in your third official police statement. They asked you about going there. You answered. You told them you had. You told them you went there with Adnan. You told them you went there with Adnan on January 13th. You told them you went there with Adnan at 2:15 p.m. Your Honor, I'd like to show the witness something. It's identified Defense Exhibit 1. You recognize this document. This is your official police statement. This is your third official police statement. When you made your third official police statement, what you said was written down, and it later was printed out. You've seen this official police statement in writing. It's accurate. It's what you said. It's what you heard. It's what the detective said. And when you made your official police statement, you knew that what you said would be relied on. You knew that what you said could influence the investigation. You knew that what you said could determine whether an innocent man would be charged. You knew that what you said could determine whether the guilty would go free. I'm going to ask you some questions about page 2, lines 4 to 5 of your third official police statement. You understand? At page 2, lines 3 to 5, you state, I was at Patapsco State Park at 2:15. When you spoke with Mr. Urich today, he asked you about what you did on January 13th. You told him a lot of things. You didn't say that you went to P Park on January 13th. In your official police statements, the detectives asked you questions about Adnan's track practice on January 13th. Scratch that. I'm going to ask you some questions about what you said to police about Adnan's track practice on January 13th. You understand? In your official police statements, you talked about Adnan's track practice on January 13th. And you talked about Adnan's track practice on January 13th in your first official police statement. The detectives asked you about his track practice, and you told them. You told them that you picked him up from track practice on January 13th. You told them that you picked him up from track practice in his own car on January 13th. And you told them, that you picked him up from track practice in his own car at 4:30 p.m. You talked about Adnan Syed's track practice in your second official police interview. The detectives asked you about his track practice, and you answered. You told him you had picked him up from track practice on January 13th, and you told him that you picked him up in his car, and you told him you told them that you picked Adnan up at 5:10 p.m. on January 13th. I'm going to ask you some questions about what you said about Adnan's track practice when Mr. Yerk was questioning you today. You understand. He asked you about Adnan Syed's track practice. You told him that you picked him up from it on January 13th. You picked him up in his own car. And you told him you picked him up at 5:15 p.m. I'm going to ask you some questions about the burial of Heyman Lee on January 13th. You understand? In your first official police interview, the detectives asked you about Heyman Lee's burial. And you told them about Heyman Lee's burial. You knew that what you told them would be relied on by police. What you told them would be relied on by the court. What you told them would be relied on by the jury. And what you told them could determine whether an innocent man was convicted, could determine whether a guilty man went free. So they asked you about Heyman Lee's burial, and you answered. You told them that she was buried. You told them that you were there for the burial. You told them only Adnan dug the grave. They asked you, scratch that, in your first official police statement, the detectives asked you how the grave was dug. You answered. You told them that it was dug with a shovel. You told them it was dug with one shovel. In your second official police statement, you were asked again about Heyman Lee's burial. You answered. You told them that she was buried. You told them you were there. And you told them that Adnan and you both buried her. The detectives asked you how you buried her. You told them with a shovel. You told them with 2 shovels. I'm going to ask you some questions. Scratch that. I'm going to ask you some questions about your truthfulness in your official police statements. You understand? In all three of your official police statements, you were asked if you were telling the truth. You answered. You told them in all three that you were telling the truth. I'm going to ask you some questions about what you told police about Adnan threatening you. You understand? In your first official police interview, you were asked about threats by Adnan. You answered. You told them that Adnan had threatened you. You told them that he had threatened you by talking about a West Side killer. You told him, scratch that, let me rephrase that. You told them that Adnan had threatened you by mentioning a West Side hitman. You were asked about threats from Adnan in your second official police statement. You never said anything about a West Side hitman. You were asked about threats from Adnan in your third official police statement. You never said anything about a West Side hitman. And you were asked about threats from Adnan by Mr. Urich today. You never said anything about a West Side hitman. I'm going to ask you some questions about your plea deal. You understand? You made an agreement with Mr. Urich over here. You agreed to testify here in court, and Mr. Urich agreed to do something in return for you testifying. You signed a plea agreement. He signed a plea agreement. You agreed to some things. he agreed to some things. That's why you're here today. That's why you're not on trial here today. That's why you're not sitting over there with Adnan today. I'm going to ask you some questions about what that plea agreement was. You understand? Your Honor, I would like to show something to witness. It's Defense Exhibit 2. You recognize this. You've read this before. This is your official plea agreement. This is what you signed. This is what Mr. Urich signed. This is the agreement. That's why you're here today. This agreement decides where you're going in life. This agreement decides whether you're going to go free or whether you're going to go to prison. I'm going to ask you some questions about what the plea agreement says. You understand? I'm going to ask you to read lines 2 to 3 of page 1. Lines 2 to 3 of page 1 say, the defendant represents that he, she, has fully and truthfully responded to all questions put to defendant by law enforcement authorities during all prior interviews. You lied in your official police statements. You lied in your police interviews. You lied repeatedly. You lied about when Adnan supposedly told you about Hae-Min Lee's murder. You lied about what you were doing with Jen on January 13th. You lied about P. Park on January 13th. You lied about track practice on January 13th. You lied about the burial on January 13th. And you lied about Anand's threats on January 13th. I'm going to ask you to read the next 2 lines of that page. You understand? It says, if at any point it becomes evident the defendant has not been truthful concerning his involvement in this incident, the state is immediately released from any obligation under this agreement. The agreement becomes null and void, and the state is free to bring any charge against the defendant supported by the evidence. You knew what this said when you signed the agreement. You know what it says today. If Mr. Urich doesn't like what you say here, he can charge you with murder. You understand that? You'll agree that you've admitted today that you've lied. You've lied repeatedly. You've lied about different things. You've lied all along the way. And you believe, as you sit here today, that Mr. Urich can renege on this agreement. He can call it null and void. And he can charge you with any crime he thinks fits the evidence. You believe that. You're scared today. You've been scared a long time. You're scared of being charged with a crime you didn't commit. You're scared of being convicted of a crime you didn't commit. And you're scared of going away for a crime you didn't commit. One moment, Your Honor. Those are all the questions I'm going to have at this time, and we'll resume cross-examination tomorrow. All right, so that's what I've had. It's a little slow, and it's only part of what we would do at trial. But I hope it gives an idea of one way to show for a jury what these inconsistent statements mean. If you saw part one of my cross-examination last week, okay, someone has a lot of comments. Actually, they're interesting, so I'd be very interested to talk to you more about it. I don't know if the person commenting had seen part one, and maybe you could watch that. It's on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, part one of the cross-examination, and see if that's the case, because what I identified in part one is I laid out the background of Jay, that he's the sole breadwinner in his family, that he has everything to lose in this case, and he has had a bad experience with the police, and he believed that, that he could be put away. So what I laid out in part one was why he lied, that he had so much on the line, and I tried to come into more specifics here about how that played out. And there's a lot more, of course, but the idea being is I want the jury to see that Jay's not lying because he's a bad person. He's not lying because he murdered Haymon Lee. He's lying because he really believes that if he doesn't do what the police want, he's going to be in a world of hurt. So in terms of theory of the case is that there's this police rush to judgment against Adnan. And as part of that theory of the case, and maybe we will, I've done some cross-examination of Don, and certainly the cross-examination of the detectives. And also, if you look on my YouTube channel, there's Adnan Syed playlist, and I do have a mock cross-examination of Detective McGillivray. And in that, I lay out a little bit more about the interrogations and about how faulty they were and how the information doesn't come across. And in part two, what I would do is, having laid this out, I would play out more of the rush to judgment. Was any of what I said used in any way by Christina Gutierrez? If you go to YouTube, I don't know my YouTube ID, but if you put in Brendan Kenny on YouTube and put in Adnan Syed, it should come up. And also, I'm on Twitter. Here's what we can do. I'm on Twitter. Sorry, just a minute. Sorry, people. On Twitter at Kenny Brendan. My Twitter and Periscope handle is Kenny Brendan. Kenny. There we go. Brendan. Yeah, Kenny Brendan. The @ that's on Twitter and Periscope. And so that's a good way you can follow me there. You can follow me there, and you can you should get updates on what I'm doing. And I think the information I gave you is enough to find me on YouTube. And I've also been tweeting about my playlist. So I also have a short mock cross-examination of Dawn months ago, which I lay out the rush to judgment when it comes to Adnan. So, but again, I'm totally open to criticism. This is not perfect, and I didn't spend as much time as I wanted to do on this at all. And I would love to hear any criticism from people, constructive or otherwise, because the thank you. Someone put what it is. Oh, that's Kathy from Court Chatter. Thank you so much for sharing that too. And I'd be happy to hear it. And just so you know kind of where I'm coming from in cross-examination technique, I do write articles for the Lawyerist blog, so if you put in Lawyerist Brendan Kenny author, it'll come up and you'll see under cross-examination what I do. And the idea, criticism's fine, because look, if you're especially a layperson, someone a potential juror, and you think what I'm doing doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. I'm not on the real case. I'm just doing this for fun. I'm a civil defense lawyer in the Twin Cities, so this isn't really even my bailiwick, but I love cross-examination, and it's a great opportunity to speak to people who are potential jurors. So any feedback you have, this is like a mock trial, in a small sense. So I really welcome it. It's really important. It's really huge. I was going somewhere here. So the theory of the case, if the theory of the case is that Jay lied because he's trying to, how should I say it? He's trying to get the heat off. And yeah, I'd love to hear any thoughts. So I'm going to continue doing these cross-examinations, and I'm going to keep going with it. And if you like it, you can be on here and feel free to share, and we'll go from there. That's a rhyme. I got to end for tonight. I'm going to end with a song that doesn't seem like a song that would be related to Jay, but it's one that, for some reason, it's an Irish folk song, but for some reason when I listen to it, it makes me think of Jay. So we'll end with that. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for being here, for sticking around. Thank you for the support, sharing this, following me on Twitter, the hearts. It's a big deal. This is stuff I think about all the time. I'm, doing in my own mind. So to be able to actually practice it is great. And thanks for Kathy at Court Chatter. It's wonderful. All right. So I will play the song. We'll get out of here. Thanks again. Sorry, I'm having trouble with it, but it'll be here in a second. I think you guys will like it. There we go. By Paul Brady. Nothing but the same old story. It's about the Irish in England in the 60s. So the whole deal with the police and all that stuff. All right.
watching them break up. Every time some board brain puts us down, making jokes on the radio. I guess it helps them all drown out the sound, the crumbling foundations. Any fool can see the writings on the wall, but they just don't believe that it's happening. No, no. Too bad. But there's a crowd that says I'm alright. City light might turn a phrase. Take me around to the parties. I like to dress a monkey in a cage and I play my party. Oh, and when the wine is just through the facade, it's nothing but the same old story. Oh, it's nothing but the same old story. Say, hey, Johnny, can't wait for Saturday night. First is raging. And no place where we can provide right. Wash away the frustration. Holds down this fire inside, but look out. Yeah. I said, look out, because I'll tell you when the people that you cross me. I got a brother in Boston. Says he'd send me on the phone. Just wrote me a letter, making out that he's cleaning up out there. 2 cars in the driveway. Summer house way down on the Cape, and I know it wakes me up in the morning. Well, I've been thinking about it, but it seems so far to go. People say in the winter that you get lost underneath the snow. And this is girl from my home place. But we've been planning to move back and give it a try. So I never got around to go out. That's why I never got around to go out. So hey, Johnny, can't wait for Saturday night. Got a thirst that's raging. And no place where we can forget right. Wash away the confusion. Holds down this fire inside, but look out. Look out. Look out. Don't come too close. Not too close.
Buddy who stuck around. Have a good night. See you around.